So how many days off the mountain are you?
11, I think.
Have Have you recovered?
Yeah, I recovered. Now, I didn't appreciate our friend A.C. Hilton, who was with me. When I was with him at dinner the next day after we came off the mountain, I said, because I couldn't hardly move, I said, A.C., are you sore? He said, no.
And he meant it.
He meant it. Yeah, he wasn't sore.
I think the Saturday, he got back Thursday maybe.
Uh-huh.
I think he did a 50-mile bike ride on Saturday.
I couldn't do a 50-minute television show.
That is insane. I got, you know how sometimes on Instagram you'll get into some sort of an algorithm rabbit hole where it
Right.
thinks you care about something for
Yeah.
whatever reason. My algorithm thought that I really cared about endurance running, like ultra marathoning kind of stuff for a few days. I have no idea why.
Okay.
Maybe because we were
Maybe
talking
because
about
he
all
said
yeah.
A.C. Hilton.
Oh yeah, something.
Yeah.
So I watch people. They almost celebrate the pain that they're
Oh,
in.
yeah.
You know,
Well, that's why
it's
they do it.
yeah, and it's like it's this kind of masochistic sort of human achievement. Anyway, but this guy had finished a 100-miler, and it was a trail run. It was up and down mountains or whatever, and over multiple days.
Yeah.
And he was in this SUV, and he was kind of cramped in the back seat. And then the video was him getting out, or trying to get out, just get his legs to move at all. And they were all laughing, and it was like, to me, it was like, this person is in intense pain, but even he had this little smirk on his face, like,
Yeah.
this is it, because he's done it before.
Oh, yeah.
He's
Yeah.
so I guess is that what it felt like for you? Like,
Well, for me, the muscle groups are different. Going up was a lot of pain in my heel, blisters and stuff like that, and the glutes, kind of hammies, I guess. But coming down, it's like skiing down a black diamond for 7 hours. My thighs were on fire.
so I want to know we haven't talked about all the details of the trip. I want to get into some of that. You fly in whatever day, but give me the timeline from you land to then you are at the base of the mountain and you're starting this thing.
He planned it all. Why don't you do that, Steve?
Yeah, so we, having been on a bunch of these trips, one thing I've learned is try not to rush the schedule because there's a lot of stuff that has to be taken care of. You have to get stove fuel and you have to get supplies. You have to go to the grocery store. Mentally, you kind of
Yep.
need to check out of one world and into another one. I
Mhm.
mean, that's
Yep.
fair to say.
Yep.
And so we built in a little time for that. We flew in Saturday night. Of course, we flew in during the global IT meltdown. So that was a mess. We
Yep.
lost the airlines lost some bags. And, of course, bags on a climbing trip are critical because they have your gear and ice axes and crampons and stoves and all the stuff that you just don't go to Walmart and buy.
Right.
And so we ended up getting most of that back the next day at the hotel. We took that day. We were trying to track one bag in particular down that didn't make it. It had all the gear for Joe and Brad that I was loaning Joe and Brad. Had some critical gear in it. But, we just had to make a contingency. But we drove to Mount Rainier that day, took a little side trip up to Mount Rainier to kind of show Joe. He'd never been there. Made a few videos. And then it was we drove to the little town at the base of Mount Adams. It's called Trout Lake, Washington.
Okay.
It's a very small little town. There's one motel there. I was joking around with them that it had 6 rooms, but I think it ended up having like 11 or
Yeah,
12.
really
I'd stayed there
really
before,
nice.
but super nice place.
Uh-huh.
Nice little place.
And had you hiked Mount Adams before?
Yes, I
Okay.
climbed Mount Adams twice before.
Okay.
Yes, and so we went to Trout Lake, spent the night, and then the next day it's going to the ranger station to get your climbing permit and kind of let them know you're going to be up there. And then you're just driving up to the place on the side of the mountain where you can leave your car and start to climb, So, and in between Mount Rainier and Mount Adams, it's a little bit of an adventure because it's a 60 miles of Forest Service road. There's literally no houses,
Oh,
no
wow.
buildings, no structures. It's just 60 miles of Forest Service road kind of through. The best way to describe it, when I first went out there, a lady told me if there is a Sasquatch, this is where they live. And it's true. I mean, you would think so, wouldn't
Oh,
you?
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you're kind of out there, so.
Well, you talk about some sort of a intermediate or kind of in between period of trying to leave one world and get to another. 60 miles of looking at absolutely nothing.
And
will
the
do that.
road, some of it was paved, but then they'd have this orange line painted around a giant crater. You're going 45, 50 miles an hour, and if you don't see that,
Yeah, there was-
you're in trouble.
There was sinkholes in the blacktop, and we about went airborne on one
Yeah,
of
that
them.
in itself was an adventure.
Yeah, we had some. I think Brad was with us, and his stomach didn't appreciate the
Yeah,
drive.
yeah.
but he made
So,
it.
so you've got it's 12,000. How many feet?
281, I think.
Okay, how much of that is not vertical climbing, meaning like rock face climbing, but how much from quote unquote base camp, bottom of the mountain to the top, is it? What's the elevation of base camp?
Well, you
basically?
park at 5,500 feet.
Okay, okay.
Now, you know, if you've never been to the Pacific Northwest, the thing about these big volcanoes is, so Mount Adams is about a 600 square mile footprint.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big mountain. 600 square miles is the footprint, but all around Mount Adams is basically sea level. And so it just looks like a giant white pimple sticking
Yeah.
up in the landscape, you know. So when you leave Trout Lake, you're at a, you know, very low elevation. I mean, you're basically in line with Portland and the ocean.
Yep.
And then, you know, up you go, you drive up. We drove through a really cool burn zone where a big forest fire had taken out,
Yeah.
you know, and then we parked at, it's called Cold Springs Campground, which is literally just primitive parking spots where you can, you know, camp. The Forest
Yeah,
Service allows you to camp there. But that's 5,500 feet.
So then you've got another 7 or
We
whatever.
got about
the
another
First
7,000
day we
feet
did
to
about
gain.
7 hours, it seemed like, up to what?
We the very first day, we stayed at about 8,400 feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the first, first mile maybe, it was like the Appalachian Trail. It was just kind of gradual, but then when you hit it, it's pretty steep.
Is there an established trail, or is it just you're on one side of the? And are you doing snake path up when it gets really, really
So
steep, or?
most of the climbing in the Cascades and the Cascade Range and those big volcanoes, you'll have what's called the approach, which is when you leave the car and you kind of approach the climb. There are kind of designated trails are easy to follow. In the case of Mount Adams, they have some cairns, rock cairns, you know, that kind of mark the way. And then you'll start coming to signs that say route varies by condition, which basically means you're on your own from here.
Sure.
Because depending on where the snow line is, and there's a lot of factors, your team's competence on different types of terrain, then the decision making starts on how you proceed. You know, on Mount Adams, the first thing you do when you leave the designated trails, you have to gain a ridge.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, so we kind of have to make decisions about how we're going to gain that ridge based on our team's competence and what kind of terrain they're comfortable on, and
Right.
whether we're using ropes or not, and all that sort of thing. So, and then once we get on the ridge, it's a fairly narrow ridge, so it's fairly easy to follow because, you know, you just don't
There's
go
only
off
one
either
way to go,
side, you
yeah.
know, so. Then you come onto the snow fields, and then it's another set of decision making, you know.
But towards the very top, it seemed like we did do some traversing. You probably did that for my sake.
We did on the really steep, you know, on our summit day when we left after night one, we take off for the summit. I kind of made a last minute decision. Normally we would climb way before daylight to get firm snow conditions and different things. But because of the wind, because of the weather, because of, you know, we put some crampons on the day before to just kind of get everybody in the, because wearing crampons is a whole different animal.
Sure.
You know. And just kind of see how does everybody do with crampons on, and so kind of last minute pivot. AC and I were talking about it, and you know we thought with the wind conditions and the snow conditions, it was pretty cold that night. When you walk away from 8,200, 8,400 feet, and you start towards the summit, you know we had 40-some hundred feet to gain, and you know we're going to gain 4,000 feet in a little over a mile. So
Oh, that's intense.
it's
yeah.
very steep. Much steeper than, you know,
Yeah.
probably what you'd
He
think.
tried to plant a seed on the Appalachian Trail. He said, I think you can do it, man. Listen, you have to work really hard to die on Mount Adams. I mean, you'd have to really try. Of course, I'm going to give you an ice axe, and here's what you do. If you fall, you put that axe in the snow so you don't hit terminal velocity. That term, terminal velocity.
Yeah.
And Brad told me, Brad, who went with us, he's like 43-year-old missionary. He hikes all the time. He got sick, couldn't make the summit day, tried, but he couldn't make it. And he'll make it next year, I'm sure. But he told me that he met a guy in Seattle who him and his wife on a whim just decided that they would go do it, and they were able to do it. I had dinner with him last weekend. I said, go find that guy because he's lying
Yeah, right.
to you.
Right.
No woman or man, either one that didn't do any training could just – now, they might have gone up kind of close to where we camped, but they couldn't – I don't think anybody could have done that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we did. There's different techniques when you're cramponing. You know, it's like a lot of things, and to put Joe in a better position, because the summit is the goal. Like we talked about it before we got there. Psychologically, in the big mountain environment, you kind of, because so much of anything that you do hard in life is mental.
Yeah, right.
It's psychological, and so you set your goal on this summit. And if psychologically that's what you've put all your eggs in that basket, then when you get there, that's still only at most 50% of the effort.
Yeah,
Coming
right.
down's just as hard.
Yeah,
And
right.
so, we knew from prior experiences, a lot of prior experiences, that Joe's, he's making it to the summit. He's going to make it. Like we can see, he's going to make it, but dude's running out of gas. And so,
Sure.
we're trying to put him in the best position, and it's easier. I said it like this on the mountain. You can do less effort and make more steps, or you can do less steps and make more effort. And so we were doing the less effort and more steps technique. We were taking a lot of extra steps, weaving back and forth, but it's much easier from an effort standpoint, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's important. So these guys, I'm 60 years old. They're not super far behind me, but they're way, way better shape than me. And you kind of got to, if you're going to get a coach, you got to be coachable. If you're going to learn, you got to be teachable. So anything he said, I told him on the mountain, I said, if you told me to put spandex underwear on my head, I would be doing that right now.
And he would, too, and that's that was a testament to.
So I sent him a picture of these boots. I've got them in this pack right here. I said, I got these boots, man, at REI. Would this work? He said, nah, probably not if you want to live, basically. He said, they're good-looking boots, but he's got these boots here. I don't know if the camera picks them up, but they're like $600 boots. They're like ski boots, not super pliable, but they're kind of uncomfortable. Well, I wore these Hoka trail shoes as far as I could because they're really comfortable.
Yeah, right.
But then I got on this sand and volcanic rock on a ledge and started sliding down the hill. AC grabbed me. I'm not saying I'd have died, but a helicopter probably would have been involved. and immediately, as soon as I could get off that ledge, I put those boots on, and they made all the difference because they dig in.
Yeah, right. Heavier. What was, not from Steve's perspective, because he does this all the time, from your perspective, exposure-wise, both in terms of like literal exposure to cliff sides or whatever, what were the sketchiest parts of the whole thing?
For me, one thing, it wasn't too sketchy, but I was about, 100 feet from the top, and you got to put sunscreen in your ears, in your nostrils. You're getting fried, and that sunscreen got in my right eye. I thought I was getting snow blindness. I was like, I can't see. I just finally blinked it all out. The sketchiest part was sliding down on the way up, and AC caught me. Glissading is...
Yeah, explain this, because you did tell me a little bit about this.
Steve probably way better than me, but it's like a tube, like a man-made tube that over years the climbers have made that you can go from the top a long way down. And when you look at videos on YouTube, it's like, oh, this is sledding like a kid. No. Steve says, Coach here says, you got to use your body and you got to put it on the ice axe and use that as an oar.
Because what kind of ice are we talking about? I mean, this is not powder. This is like old.
Well, so the winter snowpack in the Pacific Northwest, for instance, on Mount Adams at that elevation is probably getting 60, 70 feet of snow a year. And it's not melting because, it's a different dynamic than we have here in the South or where I have in West Virginia. But, by the time we're there in midsummer conditions, most of that winter snowpack is gone.
Yeah.
And these glissade chutes, they're not years old. I mean, they're just where people start sitting down with an ice axe and just sliding because these faces are really steep, and
You're
it's much
saving
easier because, you know, Joe will tell you going down is as challenging or more
Yes.
challenging than going up with
Yeah.
crampons on.
Yeah.
right.
And so, you know, in order to be able to sit down and steer yourself with your ice axe and slow down with ice axe, it's in a way easier and in a way more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Are you
know,
saving
you're-
yourself an hour?
Well, you're losing a couple thousand feet of elevation. Yeah. Oh yeah. I'd say
least.
easily an
Yeah.
hour.
Yeah.
Maybe an hour and a half.
And you've already walked up the whole thing, so you're just
Yes.
blitzed. Anything
I
that
tried to use the axe with my arm strength, and that wasn't happening. And I was flying. He told me how to do it, but I guess it didn't click. You got to put your body on it, like use it as a fulcrum.
Uh-huh.
Finally, I caught it. And you put your heels into the ice and the snow to stop. But I was flying, and he'd see it, and he'd kind of come and build up a little snow in front of him, and I'd just be flying into him. He'd say, "Don't get me with the axe." And I'd have the axe up, and I smack into him. That was sketchy, but at one point he was pretty far down. Something caught my heel, and I spun around, and I was going straight down a mountain,
head first.
head first. That was terrifying.
Yeah.
And then those two things were sketchy. And then coming back, where that really difficult place was where I slid, Steve, and I use this as an illustration, he said, "Give me your pack." He probably had 50 pounds of cooking stuff in his pack. This is 30, 35 pounds probably. He put that on his back, and then he hugged his own pack, and he navigated that ledge for me. I'm not saying it saved my life. When they started telling me, "We're going to take your pack," I'm like, "I'd do it. I'm a big boy.
I'll
I'd do
get
it
it, yeah.
myself." And the Holy Ghost
By the end of it,
said,
you're like,
he said, "Don't be a hero."
yeah, right.
So I was glad to give it to him. But that was exhausting for him. Even he's in great shape to do that.
So, lots of sketchy stuff, but more than that, I'm assuming something like this is just the monotony of just one step. I mean, how many individual steps?
47,284 according to AC.
Oh.
He sent me the statistics. I added them up.
How many?
Or 43,000, 47,000. I don't have.
Obviously, you're stopping a little bit. You camped one night at the whatever that
Two nights,
second
yes.
base camp or whatever it was. How many hours of active climbing?
19.21, I think. 12.31 miles, 7,500, 7,600 feet of elevation gain.
So 19 hours of one foot in front of the other.
And going up towards the top, it was like, I'd say, and I'm blaming it on the Lord, because I'm kind of desperate. I'm huffing and I'd go 10 steps, take 10 breaths, and then I heard him say, "Now go 50 steps and wait a minute." And so I would just do like that. And
Right.
And they were very extremely patient because they can fly up and down.
Yeah.
And it's not the hardest mountain he's climbed. He's climbed Mount McKinley and Mount Rainier, and probably others.
Not Mount McKinley. I've not climbed Mount McKinley. I'll give you a correction. Yeah, I've
in
climbed Mount
Alaska,
Rainier.
what
I
was-
did climb in Alaska, but
Yeah.
it was a different
Like-
type of mountain. It was like
Have you done one of the 14ers or whatever? Isn't that what they talk about in mountaineering? That's like everything 14 and above is like its own category.
The 14ers is like I mean, I haven't done it. There's definitely not. There's so many 14ers in Colorado. The highest mountain in the lower 48 is Mount Whitney in California. I did climb it in winter.
Okay.
Mount Rainier I've climbed 3 times and skied it once, and
That's
And
awesome.
it's 14,000, isn't it?
14.4.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the highest. So Mount Adams is the second highest in Washington State. Mount Rainier being the first.
So cool. So, I guess one of my questions is, because this is foreign to me, you're 19 hours, one foot in front of the other, that kind of monotony. You've done it a lot. You've done it just a few times in the last few years. What's your brain doing? What are the ups and downs of it? What are you telling yourself? Because I was telling him, my brain goes to like Larry David, and I'm like, yeah, okay, we're here at the top. I could have seen a picture of this. What do I do? Okay, now I got to walk down the same foot, my footprints. I'm just going to follow those back down. What is your brain telling you that says, I want to do something like this?
I think it's a phenomenal question, and I'd love to hear you answer it first.
Well, I bought some at REI. I bought some headphones so I'd listen to a book or something. Never pulled it out once because the atmosphere that you're in, first of all, you want to be dialed in completely and listen to what the guys are telling you to do. But the atmosphere and the sights are so stunning.
Yeah.
And I'm like you. You get to the top, okay, well, big deal. But here's the thing: there's 7.9 billion people on the planet, and when he and AC clapped me up, and I got to the top, he's got a video of it, and I turned 90 degrees and see Mount Rainier from that vista. There are very few humans that get to do that. And
Yeah.
there ain't no way to get there but by climbing it. And so I equate that spiritually to a sermon I've been preaching, Who Shall Ascend to the Hill of the Lord?
Uh-huh.
And there are 500 references to mountains in the Bible.
Yeah.
8 big ones, Mount Ararat, Mount Sinai, a bunch of. And that's sometimes where God gave his greatest revelation was on a mountain. And he was giving me big revelation going up the mountain and coming down the mountain. That's where my brain goes. Mount Rainier, then you turn 90 degrees this way, Mount St. Helens that blew its top. You get to see it from almost above.
That's
And
crazy.
then Mount Baker over
Mount
here,
Hood,
it's
that's Mount
incredible.
Mount Hood, yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, for all of human history, we've been trying to go, I want to see if I can get up there.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. So there's something primal, obviously, about it, but it's what are the things going through your head as you're in, just because there's, I'm assuming a large part of it that's just, this is the pain zone. This sucks. There's no,
Yeah,
it's
how did you say- what'd you
unavoidably
say about
bad.
the suck, you got to put up with it a little longer.
Well, one thing I heard when I first started mountaineering, I heard the saying, and it's like it would equate to a lot of things we do as endurance running, all the things we were talking about earlier. Mountaineering's like hitting yourself in the head with a hammer. It only feels better when you quit doing it. And there's a lot of truth to that. But
Yeah.
there's all these cliches. The best mountaineers have the worst memories because you come back, and even 11 days in, if we sit here and talk about it, you kind of romanticize all the good parts and you forget about all of the really sucky parts.
Yeah.
And that's just how humans are wired. For me, the value of doing hard things, it's something we've lost in our culture. And so I think I'm not, I don't want to over spiritualize things, but being in that environment. When I started doing this, as a men's director, I started, I used to race motorcycles. I did a lot of things, but nothing was the same as hard alpine climbing. Like
Yeah.
we didn't do any hard alpine climbing on Mount
Thanks.
Adams. we did mountaineering.
Yeah.
But mountaineering led me to kind of like alpine climbing and then harder alpine climbing. And it all is difficult, and it all has its hardships, and you're scared, but the education, you learn so much about yourself.
Sure.
I think that's one of the big things. You learn a ton about yourself. It is so good for perspective, because we live in a culture that's so spoiled, and when you're out there and you have a pot, a stove, one set of clothes, and the tools you brought with you, a sleep system, and your buddies. I mean, you are forced into a very narrow world at that point. And you learn to care for those things. Like you care for a pot the way
Yeah.
you care for your car. You care for your buddies.
It's taken you back 500 years.
It does.
of-
And what it does from
yeah.
a spiritual standpoint is you're in the environments that the folks who wrote the scriptures were in.
Yeah.
And when you go back and read, I'm not saying, we just live in this world where people will go out on a hike and they'll spend an hour hiking on a flat trail, and then they'll go get a latte and a piece of pizza afterwards.
Yeah,
and
right.
Talk about this spiritual experience they had. Well, you go suffer for 3 or 4 days in the mountains.
Yeah.
Where there's no trail. There's no, you're making decisions that literally can be life and death. You're putting up with what the weather throws at you because you have no choice. If it's the middle of the night and the wind kicks up to 60 miles an hour, you just don't pull the plug and go to the car.
Yeah,
So
right.
you
there's,
ride it
there's
out,
no
you
options.
know.
Yeah.
You got to think. And so on the Appalachian Trail, you took a smart water bottle, right? And I said, Steve, are we going to do that again on that? He said, well, if you get a hole in it, what's going to happen?
Oh, right.
because they're pretty durable. But if you get a hole in it, so I got this.
Uh-huh.
It's you have to think through all that stuff. And for me, this to me represents faith. One of the spiritual experiences or spiritual truths. And I told the congregation in Montgomery, Alabama yesterday, I'm going to preach a metaphorical sermon, and some of you are going to go, it's a stretch. It's my stretch, so let me do it. But this represents faith. I had one bottle of water for 3 days walking up that hill. And I read on the internet that water is important for humans to exist on the earth. But I went up anyway by faith because my faith was predicated on past performance. Past performance 2 years in a row. This guy had water for me. He would filter it out of a puddle that a cow just walked through, and it'd be pristine. So I knew that they would have it. And I imagine that's another thing he's thinking about on that mountain was he's the leader. He's got to make sure these guys stay alive. They set up the tent for us. They cooked the meals for us. They melted the snow. And when we got to the top, we got to that first day, Steve, and Brad said, because we'd run out of water, Brad said, I can see how Jacob sold his birthright. I'd sell my birthright.
Oh, right.
And I said, I promise if a guy walked by right now, I'd give him $20 for a bottle of water, maybe 50.
Yeah, sure.
But when we got up there, we had water.
Yeah, so it's like you're like enrolling yourself in some sort of school of endurance or so.
It's just an experience, that I feel like it has so much value.
Sure.
Right. You put yourself in positions where you're uncomfortable. We live such a comfortable existence, and you don't realize how comfortable you are until you go get uncomfortable for an
Yeah.
extended period of time.
Sure.
And then that causes you to learn about yourself. I always say perspective. I always pray when I take guys out. I always pray that God will supernaturally change their perspective the way He has mine, because you just gain a whole new perspective when you are looking out over creation from the top of a mountain like that. And then you go into the scriptures and you read about mountains and you read about valleys and you read about hardships and you read about all the metaphorical language of scripture. Those people they understood those stories because they lived, they walked paths to get water, and water was so precious to them.
Yeah, there's a reason they're pulling those metaphors because it's
And
their lived
so
experience.
When you read scripture, after those kind of experiences, you understand how precious water is, and how even Joe didn't even know this, but on our summit day, we knew we're going to get back and we're going to want water, because we didn't take a stove. AC and I carried a lot of extra water that day, but we didn't take a stove to make more water. So this is all management that we have to do on our way up and on our way back. But we knew, like AC and I knew from a lot of past experience, we get back, we're going to want water. So that morning I had preemptively melted a pot of water, left it sitting out in the sun, and put some more snow into the pot so that throughout the day the solar radiation would continue to melt that, and we would have a whole pot, 1.5 liters of water when we got back.
Yeah.
It was my fault. But when we got back, I found that the pot, I should have sat it on a rock, but I left it sitting on the little snow field where we were making water, and the pot melted and fell over.
Oh.
And it was like a soul-crushing disappointment to me to get back and not have that pot of water. So immediately, we just jump in and start melting water. We're tired. We've gone to the top and back, but immediately we've got to start melting water. When you've been in those environments time and time and time again, in Alaska, the average temperature for the 11 days I sat on a glacier with my buddy was 15 degrees.
Whew.
And so there was obviously we would spend hours a day just melting water. And then at nighttime, the water, if we had any water left, if we didn't put it in thermoses, it would freeze solid. So, we spent a lot of time, and you start to understand how precious water is. And
Sure.
then when you read scripture and you read about water and people who would go to the well, and it just takes on a whole new perspective.
Sure.
And so that's why I do it. You asked the question.
Yeah.
That's why. It's not like you're just up there trudging on a treadmill for 7 hours. It's just the grandeur of it, the majesty of it all.
And you realize in a hurry that if you can do this, you might be tougher than you think.
Sure.
And that's what it did for me. Like, I see news reports of the power could go out. Well, yeah, we didn't have any power for 3 days. We're gonna make it.
Yeah, it's inspiring. We obviously talk about Alex Honnold a lot from watching Free Solo, and because of that, that's been like gateway drug into climbing documentaries and things like that. One of the things that's always striking to me is Alex Honnold's a perfect example of this. There's a guy, a French alpinist that died. He was like an ice climber, Mark something or another, I think. But one of the things that is apparent to me, or that it was shocking to me, is how many times these people are doing this stuff with no cameras. They're not even taking a
Right.
picture with an iPhone. There's
Right.
no like, it's not for that. There's
Yeah.
some other,
Yeah.
it's bringing you into this kind of primal level of
Mhm.
existence of like, you know,
And that's a tough thing for me because I never, I didn't post anything from this trip. I should have. I mean, I'm trying to support Joe and his fundraising, but I don't think about it. I don't think about taking pictures, and I tried to take some pictures of Joe on the climb, but AC and I've talked about that a ton. Like we've talked about it on our podcast, even just like because it kind of takes away some.
Mhm.
If anything, it manipulates the experience because you're trying to frame it. There's no way you can ever explain to somebody or paint a picture to somebody that would accurately describe the experience. So
Sure.
I guess in my mind, it's like, why even try? You know, like they say, I saw this quote years ago, every picture is accurate, but none of them are the truth.
sure,
And
sure. Well, and social media it's a caricature and a projection, and you're putting your lens on something and what you're doing content. Content creation
yeah,
is what it is. You're trying to put some type of narrative to it. But I think the thing that is so cool to me is that there are people that are doing this kind of stuff all the time because there's something in it that's valuable. And so, I think in one sense, obviously we've talked a lot in other videos and posts and stuff about the fundraising part of this, but there's also a part of this where you wanted to do this because you enjoy doing these kinds of things. I'm not saying that it's
I felt like I was supposed to. He planted that seed on the Appalachian Trail. When he started planting that seed, I'm like, I'm not doing that.
right.
I'm thinking Alex Honnold, climbing, hanging off with a rope. And
Yeah,
stuff.
right.
But then he convinced me that I could do it, which was a little treacherous. And I felt like I was supposed to, and I got some spiritual principles. In fact, you don't even know this, but I'm taking this pack to the University of North Carolina at Charlotte and talking to the football team Sunday at 11 o'clock. And what I
that's
learned
great.
on the mountain, it will apply to these guys. If you're gonna climb a mountain, I learned that you need a few things. You need the right training, the right attitude. You need
Yeah.
the right supply, and you need the right equipment. But the big four I took away was you need faith, and I talked about faith in this water. You need guidance, and we talk about the Holy Spirit, and Steve would take his trekking pole, and he would say, you guys sit right here. I'm going to go scout out the best way to go down this mountain because we didn't want to waste any time.
Sure.
And he would say, that's how we're going to go like that.
Yeah.
And one time he was doing that, and two guys blew by us, and they went to the right. And Steve said, they're not going to be happy. And about an hour and a half later, they came back through. And Steve,
Oh, really?
Steve compassionately said, that detour stunk, didn't it? And you need a team.
Yeah.
I talked about how Steve took the pack twice from me, and that probably was the difference. Now, he
Sure.
couldn't take it 12.91 miles.
Yeah.
But if you're on a ledge and you need some help, admit that you need
Having somebody with you. Yeah.
you need the help, yeah, and you need inspiration. I put the shoes up and talk about at the very top. They said, "Don't reinvent the wheel. You see where we're stepping, step exactly where we're stepping."
Sure.
I talk about the people that have gone ahead of us. That was a real inspirational thing to me.
Yeah, so there's the just human experience part of it where, you're 60 years old. There's probably not going to be a ton more times where you're
I'm one and done on that, I think. But I'm gonna go the trail. I love hiking. I love some climbing, but that was I may be
a different level.
maybe one and done. I might go up to the base camp and cheer Brad on.
There's also obviously the fundraising element of it
Mhm.
too, and there's an obvious tie-in. All the stuff we're talking about, doing hard things, endurance and faith, and all these things that tie into what the ministry's trying to do. And so it's not just for the fundraising element, but that is a big
Yeah.
part of this. So what was the
Well, I joked with someone. The first year we did it, we raised $55,000. The next year it was $25,000. This year we've raised $9,800. I think people are saying, "Stop enabling this guy. You're going to get him killed."
I'm not co-signing this.
No,
Yeah.
I think there's donor fatigue. We're in the summer. We just did this in October. It's like, he's doing this again. But there are probably people out there that would like to participate. We've attached a project to that. We want to take our book, Irrevocable, the novel, and put it on stages with a gospel message and see people come to the Lord. And we need some more funds to do that. But I think maybe because I climbed a mountain, I'm totally at peace. I think God is going to take care of it. I did what I was supposed to do. And if anybody's out there and you want to climb a mountain, we have a little arrangement with Steve and AC that for a very hefty donation, these men will donate 5 days to make your dream come true, your adventure come true. There may be somebody watching this that wants to do that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it is a super compelling, intriguing kind of a thing. Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that's inspiring to me about it is the obedience element of it, where you felt like, because obviously I know that you're someone who's led and that wants to hear a whisper and follow that and kind of follow your nose, follow the Spirit thing. But you know, the fact that it hasn't been as successful as it can be or whatever, I don't think that's I don't think the thing's done. You know, like just because it hasn't so far led to this great amount of money or whatever. I think the obedience part of it, I think it's all part of what is coming from it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it is the other thing that's inspiring to me is that because giving is hard right now, because, you know, the economy, blah, 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 money for people is tight, you want to attach something that you're doing that says, I'm willing to do
Yeah.
something hard. Because the thing is, though, you're already doing something hard. Ken and my brother was talking to him last night, and he's like, do you know anybody that works harder than Dad, that travels more, does more behind the scenes, spends more time in the closet? Like, this is a consistent theme. This one mountain climbing thing is a kind of tip of an iceberg of this whole life that is, there's such a compass of true north of not just, it's not workaholic kind of stuff. It is doing the right thing every single time. And so I think that, you know, that's a really noble thing to say, I want to do something really hard that shows I'm willing to put work in. But that is just a fraction of what's actually happening every single week. I mean, going all over the place, flying all over the country, all over the world, speaking in these little churches that pay nothing, that, you know, I know what the finances look like behind the scenes. I know what is, you know, what this world is like for someone who lives off of honorariums and people's generosity and people's regular giving. And so, you know, this is not some sort of a State of the Union kind of knock against the church or whatever, but I know what senior pastor, lead pastor packages are and how much money that is and how much it's a lot of pressure and a lot of work, but I know how much work you're doing and how valuable that is to the kingdom, how valuable it is to all these churches and pastors that you're with every week. And so,
Well, that's very kind, and I appreciate that.
well, and I know it's awkward to listen to it, but I'm making an appeal to the people that if you're looking for something to give to, this is something it's a worthy cause to give to.
Well, to wrap it up, maybe we're 39 minutes into it. When I think about this water bottle, I had faith based on past performance, and that's how I live my life. Everything about this has been a miracle. Just my birth has been a miracle. So I know that he's going to be ahead of me, taking care of me. That's why I don't panic about anything. And I might just accept what your Uncle Lee said. He said, I ain't climbing no mountain for a fundraiser. The only mountain I'm climbing is those 3 steps into Country's Barbecue. That may be my next project.
Yeah, some sort of a golf tournament or something. But yeah, regardless, I think that you know, as someone who is I don't have a big appetite for bull crap, and I see behind the scenes and all the inner workings, and there's a lot of people that are in my position that, would have either nothing to say or really negative things to say about. There's a lot of bad stuff going on in the church world. This is something that's you can give to, knowing that there's no weird anything behind the scenes. There's no lavish lifestyles, or it's good work to give to, and so you can be confident that your money's going to directly into good kingdom stuff.
And I want
So-
to thank Steve and AC. Somebody said, somebody asked me, are you going to do that by yourself? I said, I'm done, but I'm not on crack.
Yeah.
I would never attempt it without this guy.
Sure.
They kept me in it.
Yeah, well, that's the only thing that made me sleep the 3 or 4 nights that you were doing that, is knowing that there's at least somebody up there that could get a helicopter to you.
Well, last week, Brad told me in the glissading tube that somebody broke their leg. They tell you not to glissade with crampons. Maybe he had crampons on, and a Blackhawk had to come in and get him from the very mountain we were climbing.
That's crazy. You need some friction, but not too
Yeah,
much
definitely
friction.
don't glissade in crampons. That's a no-no.
Yeah, I'll keep that in mind for.
And Joe is, dude. I mean, I've told several people this, and I don't have an appetite for bull crap either.
Right.
And so, I'm quick to say this. I've known Joe for years. We've kind of forged this friendship and kind of ministry. I try to, partner with Joe in ministry, and as far as what I can do to help facilitate his ministry. And in these last couple of years, it's been in the fundraising aspect, and it's disappointing to see. I mean, it's awesome to see all the affirmation and people that are excited and they want to know about the trip. But man, let's put a few bucks with that, because dude, he's not doing hard stuff on Mount Adams. The real hard stuff is happening the other 362 days.
That's right.
I mean, that's the truth.
It
I mean, the
absolutely
reason
is.
he excels on the Appalachian Trail and on Mount Adams is because Joe's a guy who knows how to put his head down, put one foot in front of the other, and keep walking no matter how deep the suck gets.
Yeah, right.
And, a lot of times in ministry, let's just be honest, the suck gets pretty deep.
Yeah, of course.
But I've heard Joe be at the rock bottom the last part of the day, just trying to get to where there's something to eat and a place to sit down. And he's saying, one more soul, it's all worth it. If I can, if one more soul comes to the kingdom, this is all going to be worth it. That's his self-talk.
For sure. Yeah.
I mean, that's the real deal. Like when you get in that environment and you get wrung out, you're
the
vulnerable.
real stuff comes out.
You are the real you shows.
No question.
And I've seen the real Joe.
Yeah.
Not actually the naked Joe. Thank the Lord. But
Metaphorically.
metaphorically,
Yeah.
I've seen Joe. And
We thank Jeff Bush and the Appalachian Men's Network, where my buddy Steve is a part of that network. That they donated $2,000. That was a big deal. And Nick Page, Steve's a board member. Nick's a board member. His Bryant Grant Funeral Home, they donated $2,000. And I want to give a shout out to both those guys with their permission, and one more big gift from a guy in Alabama, and then a lot of 20s and 50s, and you don't have to give a ton to keep a ministry going. It's the 20s and the 50s and the 5 and the 10, and
For sure.
it helps.
yeah, but those funds are as important to Joe in his daily life as that water is on Mount Adams. I mean, it
It's
really
just to
is.
keep you going.
gotta
It's
be-
fuel
it's-
to keep going.
It's what it's just how you have to. It's unfortunately what you have to have resources.
That's right.
And we do trust the Lord, but somebody say, well, you should trust the Lord, Joe. That God's going to give you the resources. Well, maybe God gave you the resources to give.
That's
Joe,
right.
And you gotta listen to that still small voice,
Yeah.
and yeah, it was a great experience.
I loved it.
Amen.
Thank you, Joseph, for doing this.
Heck yeah.
Thank you, Steve. God bless y'all.